So this lunar eclipse in Pisces is one of those moments where life makes us slow down and really pay attention. You see, where this lunar eclipse lands in your astrology chart, something hidden is being revealed. And there's even an opportunity to be able to release certain outdated patterns in your thinking that allows you to become more emotionally and psychologically empowered. So what I'm going to do through this video is walk you through the 12 astrological houses where these eclipses are landing for you. And I'm also going to show you exactly how to take advantage and what themes are important for you to integrate. So let's get into it. Okay, so let's take a look at these eclipses through the houses. And we're going to start by looking at the first house. And so if you have this lunar eclipse landing in your first house, you want to be looking at your chart where the blue dot is now landing. Okay, so that's the first house of the astrology chart. That's where you want to be looking to see where this lunar eclipse is. Okay, that's where the moon will be. It's in Pisces, and this is where the Pisces should be within your chart. Okay, so the theme for you for this lunar eclipse is going to be a identity realignment. Okay, an identity realignment. And so what am I talking about here? The first house, the theme of the first house is how we show up in every interaction, whether it be through our relationships, whether it be through our work, whether it be through the choices that we make each day. We're emotionally arriving to a moment and taking up space. That space that we take up signals to the world who we are, what we're about, and what our vibe is, right? What our energy is about. So this lunar eclipse landing in the first house is bringing to attention how you've been showing up in relationships, how you've been showing up for yourself, and what have you been telling the world about your sense of life direction. Okay, so the challenge for you with this lunar eclipse is understanding that you've probably outgrown a lot of relationship patterns. Okay, you've become very aware of the types of agreements and arrangements and contracts and bargains and relationship patterns that you've formed. And you're aware that some of them are not working for you, some of them you've outgrown, you want to establish new relationship patterns. So the challenge here is understanding that you have shifted within yourself, and that has caused a dynamic where the relationships that you've had are also needing to change. And some of them are going to be ending and you're going to be starting new ones. But this is the challenge for you. It's really seeing that you have been forming relationships in the past and you've been doing it a certain way, but because we've gone through an upgrade here, you're noticing that some relationship patterns don't work for you anymore and you're wanting to form new ones. Okay, so the challenge here for you here is over defining yourself through others and the expectations that you have created. Okay, what type of boundaries, what types of messages have you sent people? And I don't mean sent, I mean as in like how you've shown up in relationships and then how you've told people to treat you. Okay, what types of bargains and contracts have you told the world that you are okay accepting? But as I said, you've been reorientating yourself, and so now some of those bargains and contracts have been outgrown and you're changing. Now, what this eclipse is going to expose for you is exactly how those old patterns in the past have brought you types of relationships that you no longer want to continue to keep nurturing, or what types of relationships you have felt and recognized you're ready to outgrow or have outgrown. Okay, so the lesson here is let go of self-analysis and step into your more authentic presence, meaning you have come to a place where you do want to take up space in new ways and new experiences and you want to form new relationships, and you want to try to limit the amount of analysis of if this is right, that we can get into our head. You just want to take up that space and start forging and developing new relationships in a way that feels good and healthy for you. Okay. Now, all of these eclipses have a deeper purpose. And for you, this deeper purpose, again, is about autonomy, and it's about authenticity. As I said before, this is about coming into the North Node in the first house is calling you to deeply surrender to the letting go of attachments that you formed in the past that you no longer want to keep nurturing, and continuing to consistently bring presence and attention and agency to your own autonomy, to your own sense of direction, your own way of being. As I said, this lunar eclipse is about showing us where we're ready to grow into a more empowered version of ourselves. And that's what you're going to be going through over the next 5 to 6 months, right? And you'll see how that will be deeply beneficial to you. Okay? Let's move over to the second house. Okay, so if this lunar eclipse is landing in the second house of your astrology chart, that's me. I'm going to be listening to myself. All right, so let's go and find out where the second house is in the chart. That's where it is. So if you're trying to locate where this lunar eclipse is, take your chart and go over to where the 7 o'clock position is, and you'll see roughly over there, that's the Pisces energy. Okay, so what does this mean for you, right? What is the eclipse meaning? So for you, the theme is going to be self-worth reset. Okay, a self-worth reset. So the theme of the second house has to do with our deep emotional and psychological attachments to things that we prioritize in our lives that we ultimately value. Okay, so the second house is our preservation, and we define our values based on what our preservation principles are about, right? What we think is important, who do we want to align with that represents our similar values, right? And what types of resources do we share with other people that allows us to achieve things that we want to achieve within our lives? And then we prioritize those values and those resources and those people to be able to fulfill the things that we want to succeed at, we want to build, we want to strengthen, we want to create a stronger foundation for. So this lunar eclipse coming into the second house is bringing a very strong reset around your relationship to your values, what you prioritize, and ultimately the way that you relate to your resources, okay, where you want to put your energy. So the challenge here for you is that because our resources and our self-worth and our sense of priorities and values are our own, as I said before, we merge and attach, right? We attach to people, we attach to resources, we attach to symbols that represent empowerment for us, okay? And we also connect and attach to symbols that represent value for us. Okay, so you might be in a relationship with some form of education because you value empowering yourself, and that education gives you that sense of empowerment, right? You're learning, you're growing. You have an attachment towards that education that you're currently doing. That's the 8th house of the astrology chart, right? So the challenge here is that you are becoming conscious of what types of attachments you have outgrown. You're becoming conscious of where your attachments do not align with your priorities and your values anymore. And so therefore, you're understanding at a deeper level, where does your energy get placed, and how does that energy nurture you in a very physical way, and how does it create stability within your life? So this lunar eclipse, the challenge here is showing you where those attachments you have outgrown and where you need to begin to let go and abandon and ultimately complete those old contracts, those old attachments, those old karmic loops, right? And they're up for renewal. So the challenge here for us is attachment to others, approval, or shared resources. What I mean by attachment to others' approval is deep down inside, our sense of value can be linked, can be externalized to how people mirror back our sense of value. But ultimately, the second house wants to say you have to first find that value within yourself and validate that first before you can have a deeper sense of empowerment. So part of this lunar eclipse is challenging you to see where you might still ask for permission externally for your sense of power, for your sense of value, for your sense of resources. Okay, you want to be bringing resources to the table too in your life as well. Okay, so the growth point for us, right, is realizing, and I kind of piggybacking on what I just said over here, realizing that your self-worth is tied to yourself. You're learning to reclaim and reestablish where your value sits internally and prioritize making that stronger every day. Okay, that's what we're growing into over the next 5 to 6 months. So the challenge will be to see where we're still saying to the outside world, I need you to tell me that I'm valuable. Whereas here, the growth point is establishing that within yourself and forming attachments and relationships to experiences, situations, and people that empower you rather than take from you. Okay, so, and that's the growth point over here. So the lesson will be to anchor your value in yourself and trust your own ground, trust your own space, trust your own stability. Okay, all right, let's move over to the houses again, and let's move over to the third house of the astrological chart. So this is for you if you have the lunar eclipse landing in the third house of your astrology chart. So let's go and find out where that sits on the chart. In your chart, you want to be looking more towards the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock position on your chart. Of course, our charts vary depending on what house system we use, but this is where you want to be looking. That's the third house. Let's go find out what this means for you. Okay. So the theme is going to be a mindset renewal. Okay, a mindset renewal. And this is an interesting placement to have this eclipse, because as I've explained before, this eclipse has a lot to do with kind of rewiring certain belief systems and patterns that we carry within us that are no longer empowering to us. Something that we may have adopted in the past, experiences or truths that were maybe real at the time, but have become outdated in our lives. So to have this lunar eclipse land in the 3rd and 9th house axis, you're really focusing on how you communicate, how you establish your thoughts and ideas, and even the types of communication that you have internally with yourself, right? What do you say to yourself in situations? Do you have a positive self relationship? Or do you have one that is a very dominant, overbearing parent that can oftentimes come with the type of conditioning that we have, right? We shoulds and shouldn'ts and, oh, I need to be better type of motivation that is very strict and stringent, rather than giving yourself space to grow, encouraging yourself, seeing where your strengths are and playing on those. So it's very much how we speak, how we communicate to ourselves, right? And it's the language that we use, the information. So the challenge here for us is going to be seeing where these belief systems that we hold about our lives, about the world, they're going to come into like contrast. You're going to come into contrast between where certain belief systems still hold you back and where you have begun to form new belief systems or new ways of thinking that actually feel more in alignment with your values, right? Feel more in alignment with what is empowering to you. Okay? So the challenge here is going to be really seeing, what is my actual position on this? What is my truth on this? What is my perspective on this? And am I still adopting other people's truths? Am I still taking on other people's perspectives and not allowing my own perspective to be more influential in the way that I communicate, the way that I define my life, the way that I speak, right? So becoming aware of where your set of beliefs are being examined, you're trying to be more objective about them, and you're wanting to be more conscious of where these beliefs might hold you back. Okay, so here the challenge for us, the point is mental clutter or rigid belief systems blocking clarity. Okay, rigid belief systems or mental clutter that is blocking clarity. When I talk about mental rigid belief systems, it can be where you're needing to potentially be more open-minded about certain things. Maybe you need a different way of seeing something. So that's really where the growth takes place here for this eclipse landing in your third house, is that you're learning to diversify, right? You're learning to open up to different experiences. You're learning to gather more information to really come into challenge your belief systems that you might hold. And as I said, because we've been doing so much work already throughout this year on reconstructing the way that we want to live our lives, this eclipse is just bringing anything that's lingering that needs to be addressed, right? Things that need to come to the surface. So you might come into a certain belief system that is like maybe rigid or outdated, and the way that you grow towards allowing that belief system to decompose, to break down, to be released, is ultimately to expose yourself to more curiosity, to learn different things, to see it from a different perspective. So paying attention to communication, information, might broaden and open up your perspective on things. And you'll know what that is, right? I mean, these eclipses are landing in places for all of us that will speak to us on a deeper level. And you'll know what that is, right? What it is that you've been really working on with your 9th and 3rd house communication style. Okay, so the lesson here is to simplify your mind and allow the truth to emerge in the moment. What I mean by that is you're being more present with how your language and your communication style is how your mind is working. And then as you're becoming conscious of that, ask that question, is this actually true for me? Right? Explore it and allow yourself to slow down and to be present with the moment and really pay attention to the words that you use to define your reality. This eclipse really wants to bring up any patterns that are stopping you from being able to think clearly about your life in a way that's honest and true for you. Okay. Now, the deeper purpose is with this North Node here. It's as I said, it's wanting to open up and diversify through surrendering and accepting that you have changed and you are changing your perspective, and you do need a more broader horizon to know what your truth is. So this is about an exploration, a pursuit of opening up your mind to new experiences and allowing yourself to have wider scenarios and circumstances and situations give you a fresh perspective on life. Okay, so that's for the 3rd house of the astrological chart. Let's go back to the houses and we'll begin with the 4th house. Okay, so let's take a look at the 4th house of the astrological chart, and for you that has this lunar eclipse landing in the 4th house. So let's move our little blue icon, if we can actually get it to move. It doesn't seem to be wanting to cooperate. There's the 4th house of the chart. So this is roughly just before the 6 o'clock position and the 5 o'clock position on the zodiac clock, and that's the 4th house. Okay, so that's where it will be land. That's where you want to be looking in your chart. Right, let's go to the meaning. So the theme for this lunar eclipse landing in your 4th house is your foundations are being rewritten. Okay, your foundations are being rewritten. The 4th house has to do with the core foundation that has been emotionally established within your life. Okay, this is where you grow up in your home. It's the place that you always return back to when there's a need for safety. And it's a place that we return to that we feel consistent and familiar with because we've lived with that foundation for our entire lives. And the 4th house nurtures and establishes and creates that emotional foundation for us. So this lunar eclipse landing in the 4th house is going to bring to the surface where we have been changing and examining and exploring where our foundations have, as I said, shifted. Okay. So the challenge for you that has this lunar eclipse in the 4th house is to actually see that it's actually about the 10th house, right? It's the opposite sign. The challenge is saying, hey, how have you defined security in the past for yourself? Where has your sense of emotional safety been placed? Okay. How have you emotionally nurtured and met your emotional needs? And where do you still maybe externalize those emotional needs to be met by other people, which then threatens your sense of safety, because you could always have a no, you could always have an abandonment, you could always have somebody that doesn't understand the emotional needs that you have. And by externalizing it, you would ultimately put your safety in other people. Right? So that's one big challenge that comes along with this. The second challenge that comes along with this placement as well is that, of course, what type of identity have you shown the world, right? The way that you go out into the world and define yourself, right? Oftentimes we define ourselves through labels like our careers or the job roles that we have or the titles we give ourselves and how we emotionally connect to these roles or titles. This lunar eclipse is going to be exposing where we feel that we have maybe outgrown these titles, where we have laid new foundation in new places, and we're watching the old foundation and the structure and the titles and the definitions that have housed our identity shift. And so you might be saying goodbye to certain life direction choices that you've made, certain titles, certain definitions that you've defined your life through. You're saying goodbye to them. And we're in a transition point of beginning to nurture and establish a stronger connection to the new version of yourself. And so the challenge that comes along with this energy is seeking worth in career or external validation, right? Your emotional safety in the identity or the terminology or the titles you might have given yourself. And that safety would have been placed there. So you might, for a long time, have thought that your life purpose and direction should have been working as an accountant. And this eclipse is exposing the realization that you don't feel emotionally desirable to put your energy in that space anymore. That's no longer who you are. And this is exposing that emotional need to let go of that attachment as you transition into where you actually feel emotionally available and real for a new part of your life. So the growth point here for you is emotional honesty. Okay? It's about being aware of what changes have taken place within your life and allowing yourself that emotional honesty so that you can be more real with where your energy is emotional energy is no longer wanting to be placed, and where you want to continue to nurture this new version of yourself. And that can be scary because it means coming into a completely new direction. For some of you, that might literally be a new direction. But you want to continue to keep nurturing that new emotional direction and allowing this 5.5 to 6 month eclipse transition you into this new space. It's exciting times. So the lesson that might be showing up for you is learning to build a true stability through emotional honesty at home, right? Build true stability through emotional honesty at home. And what I mean by home is I don't literally mean your home, although that is obviously a place to begin. Many of you might be working on the mother relationship. Many of you might be working on the actual relationship at home. Many of you might be working just simply on your own internal home relationship to yourself. Either way, you want to be building that stability through being more emotionally honest with yourself and nurturing the place that you want to cultivate and grow and letting that lead you. Right. So the deeper purpose that comes with this lunar eclipse for you is surrendering to the fact that your emotional reality is shifting and changing, right? Your identity is changing. Your emotional capacity for excitement and joy is shifting and changing. And you want to be allowing that to exist and to flow through you. All right, let's move over to the houses, and we're going to take a look at the fifth house of the astrological chart. Okay, so let's take a look at where the fifth house of the chart lands. We're going to use our little blue button to move us to the fifth house of the Leo archetype. So if you're trying to locate this lunar eclipse in your chart, this is the area that you want to be looking at, right? This is generally where the fifth house will land in the chart. It's like between the 4 and 5 o'clock position on the clock. And that's where the fifth house is, okay? So let's figure out what the meaning is of this eclipse. Okay, so the theme is going to be creative liberation. Creative liberation. The fifth house has to do with the way that we show up in the world, tell people who we are, and also internally validate that expression. Okay, it's how we show up in the world, and it's how we tell people who we are by validating our creative expression. So the types of clothes we wear, the style that we wear, the interests that we have, the passion projects we pursue, and the way that we communicate, our personal quirks, all of the ways that we bring color to our lives and how that color represents our creative expression. This is that fifth house energy. So creative liberation comes from the fact that this eclipse will show you that there are certain parts of yourself that still feel vulnerable, showing us who you are. So the challenge comes here with the South Node sitting in the 11th house is there's been a dominant, overdeveloped perfectionism pattern that stops you from fully allowing yourself to be creatively expressive, to reveal to the world who you are, right? And this has to do with your friends group. It has to do with the groups that you belong to. It has to do with the people that inspire you and aspire you to pursue things that are meaningful and real and purposeful in your life. Okay? So oftentimes we can get very complexed around feeling safe to express ourselves. This eclipse is exposing where those places no longer align with your values and how you want to express yourself and what you want to express yourself towards. So a simple example could be you might notice that you've outgrown a certain friends group or a group or an organization because it no longer aligns with what is meaningful and creatively purposeful for you. So the challenge is becoming conscious of where that pattern is existing within you. So confronting conforming to group standards or losing joy in comparison. That's the kind of challenge here, right? Conforming to group standards, which is denying your own creative expression if you think differently, or aligning with certain rules, regulations, and patterns in groups when you know that you don't feel that that's actually honest and true for you. Okay? And then you lose yourself also in detaching and not actually speaking up and having a voice, right? Where's that creativity being displaced? So what is the growth pattern for us, right? What's the possibility? What's the potential here for us? Well, as I've just described in the challenge, it's to release the need to conform and hide in those group dynamics that you know that you have outgrown, that you feel that you're ready to shift your energy and begin to pursue creative purposes and projects that feel aligned and meaningful for you. You want to be examining where that relationship, where that creativity is no longer alive anymore, and you want to stop putting yourself in those places where that group dynamic is not reassuring you, giving you that inspiration, doesn't have the same ideals or values as yourself. Okay? So it's really not hiding anymore if you feel that you have outgrown a certain group dynamic, pattern dynamic, organization dynamic. You want to continue to keep nurturing that creative spark and pursuing it, even if it's scary. And you'll know exactly what this is because there will be a theme in your life that will be somehow related to this. Okay? So the lesson here, right? The lesson here really is just to reclaim creative play and align with authentic joy, right? To reclaim creative play is to is to allow yourself that energy and that aliveness and that joyfulness that you bring to things that make you inspired, right? That feel inspired. Okay, you want to reclaim that wherever that sits for you, and it can be in the smallest of things. Right? It doesn't have to be this massive grand gesture. It can simply just be in your relationship to how you love cooking food and you stop doing that, right? You want to pick up back the things that feel joyful and creatively meaningful for you within your life. So, what really is the deeper lesson? Okay, the deeper purpose here, the deeper purpose is what I meant to say, sorry, is that this is an invitation to reconnect with the part of you that lives in a state of innocence, that lives in a state of wonder, that lives in a state of excitement to explore the world in ways that excites imagination, that ignites imagination, and allows that to permeate and to influence the people that are around you. This is an opportunity to reconnect with that part that might have been disowned, put aside, not prioritized. This is your time to shine. And now we're going to start by looking at the 6th house of the astrological chart. So if you've got this lunar eclipse that's landing in your 6th house, and what we're going to do is move our little blue icon all the way to the 6th house of the chart. There it is there. So if you're looking for where this lunar eclipse is landing in the 6th house, that's where it lands, right? Just beneath the 3 o'clock position of the natural clock. And that's where it should be roughly in your chart, okay? All right. So if we go ahead and we look at the eclipse meaning itself, this is about service and healing shift. Okay, the theme here for you is about service, and it's about a healing shift. Now, what do I mean when I say service and healing shift? Okay, the 6th house of the astrology chart is where we are abducted into experiences that reveal lack of competence, that reveal a lack of skill that we feel that we have, or life experience. Okay? When we are brought into experiences that remind us of where there's still growth potential, or where we need to be becoming more conscious of what where we lack some competence. Okay, when we're brought into these experiences, the subduction feels very heavy. It feels sometimes intimidating, or it feels that we are maybe feeling humiliated. All right, we feel small in this area. And it's simply because that abduction experience reminds us that there's still more things that we're learning to become conscious of in the world that we live in. When we go through certain patterns of abduction and we emotionally grieve this emotional place of smallness, and we eventually then confront the limitation, we make certain adjustments within our lives and we grow, we are able to step into a deeper state of giving, right? We're able to step into a deeper state of, or it allows us the potential for being able to be in authentic service to those, right, that might not know what you know. Think about it, right? Oftentimes the word service is associated with experiences like work and our work, etc. And in the most part, that is us giving our competence to a larger organization, or to an employee, right, or to a project. That service that we're rendering is giving that competence to it. So this is the same thing here. The 6th house is showing you, or this lunar eclipse is showing you, where your service and energy and attention might be invaluable, or it's revealing to you where it's invaluable. It's also revealing to you where that value is no longer appreciated anymore. So you're becoming very aware of how you emotionally show up with your competence and whether or not that's actually appreciated. Some of you might be experiencing other thing where you're learning that some of the things that you want to do within your life, dreams, aspirations, etc., by being conscious of the 6th house lunar eclipse, it might reveal to you where you need to gain competence to be able to step up into a more challenging or difficult level and achieve the success that you want to achieve in that level. You might be told, hey, you need to grow here, you need to get this information, you need to get this education, you need to have this experience, and then you can be able to move up or in the direction that you want to move into. So how does that service work for you? So again, the challenge here with this lunar eclipse for you is becoming conscious of patterns of self-sacrifice, becoming conscious of where you might have certain ideals about your life that need to come into reality. And when they come into reality, you realize, oh, I still need to grow here in order for that ideal to become real. Okay. Now, I wrote here also a shift in healing. The healing piece is the 6th house will also tell us how we emotionally show up in our day-to-day routines, and are those routines emotionally nurturing us in a way that allows us to achieve the things that we want to achieve in our lives? Where are our routines in our lives maybe exhausting us? Oftentimes we talk about burnout, right? When suffering from burnout, it is we've arrived at a point emotionally where we just can't handle and tolerate and need a break. The 6th house energy might force you to realize that there are certain routines and choices that you're making in your day that you might be denying the right emotional rest that you need. You could be forced into that. Okay, so the challenge here for you really is ongoing over managing routines or trying to fix yourself. And what I mean by fix yourself is not in the sense of, because sometimes we can get into an over-analysis paralysis process with 6th house energy. And if you've got this axis here, fixing yourself meaning you're always in a constant state of repair, and there's always in a constant state of, I need to be better, I need to be doing this, I need to be doing that, I need to be fixing this, I need to be healing something inside of myself. This energy also asks you to realize that sometimes it's not about you being wrong or broken. It's about realizing what you want to actually cultivate and become stronger at. It's like just a subtle reframing of the mental structure that allows you to grow something that you want to prioritize and value within your life, rather than seeing the lack in it. So it's quite a lot in the 6th house energy, okay? There's quite a lot. So the growth point here really is to really notice for yourself, where am I over exerting myself? Where am I under exerting myself, depending on where you are in your life? And also paying attention to my energy and what my lifestyle or routine that I have allows me to have a balance between rest and doing the things that are important in my life, right? Is there a balance between too much or too little? Okay. All right. The deeper purpose that comes along with this energy, right? The North Node in Pisces in the 6th says, it's important to pay attention to self-acceptance. It's important to pay attention to being able to be more aware of what your dreams are or what your ideals are, and to ask yourself the question, what do I need to do to get there? And then go ahead and create a routine and a plan that nurtures that process. There's a duality that takes place with it. Some of us might feel, as I said, the strong needing towards healing and accepting and working through internalized patterns of shame and guilt, etc. And some that are working on the pattern of overextension and undervaluing. And what types of ideals and dreams do you want to bring to your world? That's what the 6th house solar eclipse or lunar eclipse is going to wanting to ask for you here, okay? The 7th house of the astrological chart, okay? So for you who has the lunar eclipse landing in your 7th house, that's where it's located on your astrology chart. It's just between the 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock position, okay? That's where you want to be looking to see where this lunar eclipse is landing for you. Now, the theme for this lunar eclipse in the 7th house is relationship alignment. Relationship alignment, okay? The theme of the 7th house has to do with two main things. One, what does equality and fairness look like in relationship for you, okay? What does equality and fairness look like in relationship for you? It then drops into a deeper state and it says, how are you meeting your own needs and how are you telling the environment what those needs are? You're telling people in relationship, you're signaling to them, these are my needs and I'm meeting those needs within myself. The 7th house is about exposing how we relate. Okay, how are we relating? What types of boundaries do we establish within ourselves and then tell the world? Where are we placing expectations on people and then experiencing the potential imbalance dynamic that occurs because they're not meeting those expectations? How do I meet my own expectations? This is the realm of the 7th house. So partnership is coming into light with the 7th house, okay? Now the challenge for you with the South Node being in the first house is it's kind of like two sides, right? You have a tendency to maybe hide in relationships and put yourself smaller and make yourself smaller, okay? And this eclipse wants to show you where you might not be fully showing up in the relationship experience for fear of vulnerability, for fear of not being seen or acknowledged, or you're afraid to take up space because you learned growing up that when you took up space, there was a negative reaction. So part of this challenge with this lunar eclipse is really seeing how are you showing up in relationships? What type of message are you telling the person in your actions, in your choices, in your behaviorisms, and particularly in the emotions that you bring to the experience? Okay, so this is the spectrum. And sometimes with this type of pattern, you can either find yourself saying, oh, wow, I'm not in relationship at the moment. But you still have relationship with colleagues or workers, friends, etc., and also your family. So it's all the types of relationships that you have. This is the challenge right for you over here, is really looking at where you might undervalue and not show up to your fullest potential in the relationship. And it sends a message and you attract types of relationships that are imbalanced, okay? Now, the challenge point here for you is self-criticism and control that is blocking intimacy. Again, when it comes to 7th house, when I talk about self-criticism, because you've got Virgo on that first house over there, you're going to have a tendency to feel that you're not as good enough. You're going to have a tendency to feel, all the things that Virgo does, which is oftentimes just make us feel like we internalize this inner sense of lack, or I'm not good enough. And then that blocks intimacy in the context of relating to people because you're not maybe being vulnerable or showing yourself in fear of judgment or persecution, etc. Okay, so that's the challenge. This lunar eclipse wants to show you where there are certain belief systems you might carry that hold you back. So the growth potential here for us, right, is you've been asked to release outdated ways of how you might order and control yourself, and how that is, as I said, blocking deeper connection and relationship experiences. All right. So you're not here, the growth point here is that you're not here to play small, and you're learning to give more presence to playing bigger, and to give yourself the space to experience the spectrum of relationships in a way that you feel that you want to, and to not let those patterns of self-doubt creep in. Okay. So the deeper purpose that comes along with this eclipse is this. Okay. You are growing towards experiencing more authentic relationship connections. You're growing more towards being self-accepting of who you are, being patient with your growth, and allowing yourself to see yourself as an equal in the context of a relationship. All right. And if that means realizing that there's certain boundaries that you need to first define within yourself, that's what this is. It's also about learning where you might have certain parts of yourself that are guarded for fear of abandonment, betrayal, or criticism or self-doubt. You're breaking these patterns down so that you can connect in more authentic and more meaningful ways. We're going to start with the 8th house of the astrological chart. And we'll scroll all the way to get to the 8th house. And for you, well, you wouldn't be patient because you would have already clicked on the timestamp. Okay, so here is the 8th house of the astrology charts. It sits there at the kind of like 1 o'clock position, 2 o'clock position on the chart. And you want to be looking at this area of your chart to see where this eclipse is going to be landing for you. Okay. All right. So let's go look at the meaning that this eclipse has for you. So the theme for this eclipse is going to be emotional depth and vulnerability. Emotional depth and vulnerability. The 8th house has to do, at the most fundamental level, it has to do with the way that we reveal ourselves to the world in our most vulnerable space. It's where the armoring comes off. It's where the most transparent, authentic version of ourselves exists. But we know that we live in a world that can hurt us, that we can experience emotional pain through. So we learn to protect these vulnerable places, and we learn to create strong patterns of preservation that allow us to navigate this world and feel safe within it. So this area, this eclipse, is going to bring into question the themes around the types of resources that you share with the people that are close to you, and the types of agreements and trust bonds that you have formed with people around you. And if those trust bonds are being reviewed, that's what's going to happen here, right? So deep psychological questioning, patterns of intimacy and emotional vulnerability, and as I said, emotional bonds are going to now be challenged. So the South Node, the South Node will be in Virgo, and it's in your 2nd house, and it reveals where you either have 2 things going on. One, you have certain preservation instincts in you, like survival patterns within you, that are formed at an earlier point and are actually holding you back from being more emotionally open and vulnerable and experiencing true intimacy with the people that are around you, right? The ones that you do want to connect with on an emotional level. So wherever you become overly defensive and overly guarded for fear of betrayal, for fear of abandonment, for fear of being re-hurt again. Okay? So that's the challenge here, is that this eclipse wants to bring to the surface where there might be certain experiences that are blocking you from experiencing that more emotional depth. Right? At the same time, it's also showing you where your sense of value and your sense of investment is no longer healthy to continue to investing in, right? So there are certain attachments that you might have where once you saw value in those attachments, but they're no longer valuable to you anymore. And so this eclipse wants to bring that to the surface so that you can then step into the growth pattern. And the growth pattern here is allowing yourself to grieve and let go of that which is no longer emotionally nurturing you. Okay? To let go and grieve that which is no longer emotionally nurturing you and does not have the same amount of emotional depth and honesty that you're wanting to bring. So you want to be stepping away from those experiences and progressively letting go of them, and then allowing yourself to grow towards new patterns, new experiences, new people, new situations that feel aligned with your values, where you can see the resources, where you can see the honesty and the emotional depth that's available, and you want to be merging with those patterns. You want to be cultivating and forming new relationship patterns to them so that they can ultimately enrich your desire for deeper emotional connection and intimacy. Okay? It's not going to be an easy one, because the growth pattern here is also showing you where you might, as I said before, it will expose where you still have patterns of protection and how those patterns of protection keep you from emotionally experiencing an intimacy. So this is going to ask you to grow towards really challenging those deeper parts of yourself and questioning and asking, are you being asked to be more emotionally vulnerable, and challenge those parts of you that feel vulnerable and allow yourself to experience deeper emotional intimacy when that sense of safety and that preservation is feeling mirrored. Okay? So you might be blocking yourself from experiencing something more empowering by remaining guarded, right? As opposed to allowing yourself to progressively start to open up and form bonds and stronger emotional trust. Okay, so the deeper purpose here, the deeper purpose with this eclipse has to do with a deep transformation of trust within yourself and where you place that emotional trust and how you allow other people to place that emotional trust in you, right? It goes both ways, right? In order to experience emotional intimacy with another person, you might be protecting that part or not trusting, but how are you showing that other person not to feel safe with you too? So it's a two-way street with this. And this is about transforming that relationship to emotional trust. We're going to go over to the 9th house of the astrological chart. Here we are, 9th house. And if you are trying to figure out where this eclipse is landing for you, this is where it goes. It's the 9th house of the chart. It's there at the 1 o'clock position in the clock. That's where you want to be looking in your astrology chart to see where the Pisces sign is. And you want to be looking there. That's the 9th house. Okay, so the 9th house, this will be for you. So let's go and look at what the meaning is for the 9th house here. Okay, so the theme is going to be belief system release. Okay, belief system release. It works like this. The 9th house has to do with how we are individually designed to look at the world. Okay? All human beings need some form of truth, perspective, or belief system to be able to try to digest and make sense of the world, right? The imprinting signals from our environment and the culture and our experiences. We need something to frame it. The 9th house is what is responsible for how we frame the world. So, of course, if this eclipse coming into this 9th house for you, the theme is going to be looking at these belief systems and ultimately addressing where there are certain perspectives, points of views, truths that you hold that need to be updated, right? Some need to be released, and how you're learning to integrate newer patterns of growth into this area of your life. Okay, so the challenge that's going to come your way is you're becoming conscious of where you might hold many diverse points of views, many data sets, and those data sets and points of views and perspectives and mental clutter, it stops you from having a deeper sense of intuitive clarity about your sense of the world. Okay, The third house has to do with the way that we collect information about the world, process it, and then put together a worldview. So with the South Node in Virgo, right, you carrying this Virgo energy over here, your tendency towards putting together a worldview is seeing it through a lens of extreme detail, right? Seeing it through a lens of extreme, precision and data collecting, to the point where you don't allow for your own flow of perception or truth to be present. There's too much mental orientation going, and you're learning to surrender to what you feel within yourself, what you directly experience with yourself. And it doesn't mean that for all of you that are listening to this that's how it is, but the tendency with this axis of the 9th and 3rd house being Pisces Virgo is, again, you might have you're coming into learning to develop a worldview and an experience of life that feels more free from an Excel spreadsheet way of trying to make sense of things. So this can be challenging because this eclipse challenges your intuition and your relationship to how you trust your intuition. It challenges your way of experiencing natural wisdom versus theory, right? And it challenges where you might feel emotionally fearful of living and allowing your intuition to guide you more in experiences because it feels too abstract. So this is exposing where you might override your intuition or your sense of something or your natural instinct to want to explore by putting a Excel spreadsheet data set, organized form information, and also, as I said, trusting your instincts and your intuition to guide you on experiences or situations. Okay. So what is the growth point here? The growth point is looking at where your mind might hold you back from experiencing things in life that are more organic, that are more free, to be free within yourself, to allow yourself to experience a sense of freedom in your way of thinking that challenges where those edges of rigidity might exist, and also where you might carry underlying feelings of doubtfulness within inside of yourself that say, oh, I doubt myself, right? Or I'm not sure about myself, right? There can be certain patterns of this thinking that underlie your ability to just be truthful and free with who you are, and to let life in some way kind of guide you and experience things without needing to have every single detail mapped out exactly to the core. Okay? So the deeper purpose here with this lunar eclipse landing in your 9th house is learning to experience a side of life where you're comfortable in the uncertainty and becoming more conscious of a strong connection to having faith in yourself to know that you will know what you need to do when you need to do it. Let's take our journey all the way to the 10th house of the astrological chart. So for those that have got the lunar eclipse landing in your 10th house, this is going to be for you. So let's move our little blue icon all the way to the 10th house of the chart. There it is. Fantastic. So if you have this lunar eclipse landing in your 10th house, that's where you need to be looking in your chart, okay? It's just between the 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock position on the natural zodiac. That's where you want to be looking in that area to see where this lunar eclipse is landing for you, okay? So let's go figure out what this actually means for you. All right. So your theme for this eclipse will be around purpose, and also to do with a reorientation of your sense of life direction. Okay, the purpose that you give to your sense of life direction, there's going to be a reorientation of that. and you've already started to feel it, this eclipse is just going to reveal to you where that final push needs to happen in order for you to fully commit and to keep nurturing where your life wants to take you now and what feels good and real and authentic within yourself. Okay, so the 10th house of the chart shows us how do we emotionally, or where do we emotionally give our attention to in our choices every day that has to do with our sense of life direction, our goals, the things that we want to build within our lives. Okay, this is the deepest sense of this 10th house energy. It's the way that we emotionally show up, take up space emotionally in that area that is aligned with a sense of direction, a sense of goals, a sense of orientation. Like, this is what I want to build. This is what I want to continue to keep nurturing. Okay. Now, in our Western culture, we call this our careers, right? The job titles, the places that we go to, that we give our emotional attention to, and then that emotional attention that we give to builds an institution or an organization, or it gives that energy to that structure, and that structure has a certain goal, right? And that goal is being fulfilled by you. So whether or not you're, self-employed or working for a company, either way, it's how you show up emotionally and give your energy to that space that achieves a certain goal. Now, so we call this our career, our vocation, our public identity, the way that we are seen in the public space, okay, out there in the world, the sun place. So where am I going? What am I building? And how am I showing the world who I am? So this lunar eclipse comes with a challenge, and it comes with a challenge because what it does is it exposes where the internal reality for you has emotionally shifted, that then naturally affects the way that you show up in the world and where you want to put that energy, what you want to build, where you want to sacrifice your time for a career or a vocation. That internal landscape has changed for you, or has begun to change. And you're noticing that. And so where you're showing up in that public space, in that career, that vocation, you might find yourself saying, well, that old identity, that old space, I no longer resonate with it anymore. Or I've reached the end of what I could possibly achieve. And so now you're in a question where, is there something new that you want to grow towards? So the challenge here again is really noticing where you still could be holding on to certain emotional patterns within yourself that you know that you've outgrown, but are holding you back from stepping into that more empowered version of yourself. And that's where the growth potential comes in with this lunar eclipse. Okay, it's noticing where these emotional comfort zones exist within yourself and how they've become like boxes of limitation, and how you are going to like break those boxes and climb out of it and give yourself that emotional freedom to grow into the version, into the pattern, into the direction that you feel is deeply meaningful and real and alive for you. Okay, so this is a reorientation of your sense of purpose in your career, in your life direction, in whatever that is, whatever it is that you're building within your life. And if you have an absence of that, which sometimes can be the case with Neptune all in that 10th house there, or should I say the Pisces in the 10th house, right? That idea of feeling lost can be part of this experience. Now, where do I put that energy? Well, this eclipse wants to bring that energy, that awareness to the surface and reveal to you and say to you, hey, it's time to re-examine where these emotional comfort zones and emotional places within inside of yourself feel alive, where they're exciting, and then begin to nurture that and allow that to grow within you, right, to swell. That's going to automatically change your life direction. So the deep purpose here, right, the deep purpose that comes along with this eclipse for you is how this like public role that you have been experiencing, that you have been living through, this identity, this structure, how that is being reshaped into a stronger sense of authenticity, where it actually feels alive, where you actually feel empowered, where you actually feel like you want to build something that wants to sustain itself beyond your life, right? This is about giving compassion to that which is ending and giving space for that which is growing. Okay, so let's take a look at the 11th house of the astrological chart. We're going to go back to the houses section, and we're going to scroll all the way over to the 11th house. This is for you, and there we go. Okay, so the lunar eclipse is going to be landing in the 11th house of the chart. We're going to move our little blue icon all the way to the 11th house. So if you're trying to locate this in your astrological chart, it's there between the sort of 11 and 10 o'clock position in the clock system. Okay, that's where you want to be looking roughly within your chart. You should see the Pisces energy there. Okay, so what does this mean for you, right? Let's break this down. Okay, so the theme is going to be surrounding your community alignment, okay? Your group alignment, your organization alignment. It's the places where you feel that you have a deeper sense of belonging, and what does that larger group of organization or friends group or community, how does that mirror and amplify that sense of belonging, right? This is the broader scope, the friends group, and your sense of feeling of home and belonging and connectedness to a larger group of people. That's what's sort of changing for you at the moment, and you'll feel that deeply. So part of the 11th house has to do with our network, okay? As I said, the groups of people that we belong to, the situations and circumstances that allow for our deeper sense of creativity to come through and to shine. Like, do we belong to the right people that allow us to feel elevated rather than to feel depleted? Are we in a group and an organization with a network that allows for our ideas to manifest versus to feel isolated because there's a misalignment in values or priorities or interest, right? So the challenge that comes along with this lunar eclipse landing in your 11th house is that you have already, for the most part, this is what you've been working on for the most part in the beginning part of this year, is you've noticed that there are certain ways of expressing yourself in a network dynamic or a group dynamic or an organization that you feel is becoming misaligned. Okay? You feel that you're not showing up in a way that is bringing your true talent, your true skill set, your true purpose, and contributing to the wider space. There's a growing sense that you have changed, and you want to either bring something to the larger audience, or that you're noticing that it's not, that you are doing that, but it's not being received or mirrored back. And so there's a schism. Either you want to grow into that space and take up space and show something, or you are doing that, but you're not getting that value back. So the challenge here with this eclipse is exposing where that creativity that you're bringing, that joy, that sense of passion that you want to bring to it, where you're either diminishing your own sense of value, your own sense of purpose, your own sense of creativity, and you're hiding, right? You're stopping yourself from actually expressing joy and creativity and excitement because it hurts too much to be unseen or to be rejected or to not be seen in the way that you value yourself, right? So you're staying in that space, and this eclipse is exposing where these patterns stop you from making that change that you need to make within your life to move to new experience, new organizations, groups, networks, etc. That's the one part of it. The other part of it is that if you are ready to actually want to give more and show that creative potential that you have, but you're hiding, right, due to a feeling of lack, a feeling of doubt, a feeling of a self-censorship. Either way, I think the key word here being self-censorship is the challenge. Whether it be that you're doing it for fear of rejection, humiliation, persecution from the group, or you're doing it because it hurts too much to continue to keep sharing that creative excitement and joy, and it's not being seen in the way that you are bringing it, and so therefore you're kind of shutting down and you're feeling that worth diminishing, and now you're looking elsewhere, right? Either way, the growth point for this pattern, for this eclipse, is to begin challenging where you stop yourself from validating what is your creativity, what is your potential, what you can offer, what you can bring. And if you're self-censoring out of a fear of insecurity or in value, then what you want to be doing is strengthening that and challenging those comfort zones and stop living in that box and actually give something, right, to the place that you feel that you want to. So it could be, yeah. And then the other side is you're noticing that you're self-censoring because of that rejection. You've got to be asking yourself, have I outgrown this place? Do I need to move to something new? Do I need to consider changing or bringing this to a head? Either way, this eclipse wants you to grow out of whatever pattern is stopping you from experiencing that joy and creativity within the context of the group dynamic, and show up more, validate yourself more, and bring more of yourself to the table so that you can be fully experienced and seen in a way that feels nourishing to you in the wider audience. Okay? So, what's the deeper purpose that's coming through? The deeper purpose for you over here is that there is a realignment that is taking place within yourself that is either bringing you into more visibility in the context of your network, your groups, your friendships, etc., or you are letting go of those patterns, those groups, those friends, networks, associations, and you're moving on and forming new attachments in new places where your purpose, your creativity, and your deeper sense of expression is actually seen, validated, and recognized. Okay? So let's take a look finally at the 12th house of the astrological sign. And we're going to be going all the way over to the 12th house here. Almost there. There it is. Okay. So this is for you if you have the lunar eclipse landing in your 12th house. So we're going to go over to the chart, move my little blue dot, which should move. There it is. Okay, perfect. So this is where the lunar eclipse will be landing in your chart. It's like just above the 9 o'clock position, just below the 10 o'clock position. And that's where this lunar eclipse should be landing. So when you're looking at your chart, this is the area of your chart that you want to be trying to identify and locate. Okay. All right. So what does this all mean? All right. So we go over to the section over here. And the theme for you is going to be deep spiritual surrender. Okay. Spiritual surrender. And I'm going to break this down. Here, this eclipse is bringing like hidden patterns to the surface. It's revealing where you're ready to let go and release ways, certain internalized patterns of identity, right? How we relate to ourselves. This is an incredibly healing experience with this lunar eclipse over here. But in order to experience that healing, we need to go through certain like deep states of communion internally within ourselves that goes beyond just sitting in silence. It's like deeply understanding the subconscious relationship that we have to ourselves and how we are emotionally connected to the larger world, right? This placement over here is revealing these unconscious patterns within us. It's revealing where we're ready to dissolve and finally release what we no longer want to have within our lives, where it feels like it's a natural ending and we're ready to move on for something new. And it's also a place where we're ready to integrate experiences that we may have not in the past been able to do. But now we're ready to really look at them with compassionate and sensitive and deeply forgiving eyes towards ourselves and towards the experience, so that we can move beyond whatever that experience was that we are carrying subconsciously with us. So the challenge that comes along with this lunar eclipse in the sixth house, or in the 12th house here, is that the sixth house is, well, the south node is in your sixth house. Okay, so as I said, this is the place where there's a strong identification with a certain order in your life that you try to keep consistent and persistent with, right? There's a certain order that you have within your life, and if that order breaks, then everything's wrong. So part of this eclipse and the challenge here is to really begin to look at the way that you order your life, and how, if that order is still like eliciting a deeper sense of connection to the larger world, to something that feels more deeply meaningful and real within your life. Okay? The challenge here is seeing and exposing where meaning has felt like it's disappeared, where a sense of deeper emotional nourishment that gives you that sense that there's something beyond just your immediate self that you're connected to, that allows you to feel a sense of purpose. This challenge in the sixth house here is to really see how you've been showing up in your life, and how you've been nurturing that sense of deep meaning and purpose. And also how you've allowed yourself to maybe exist within a box that has felt very confined, for fear of the greater unknown, for fear of uncertainty and unpredictability. And so therefore to try to minimize the amount of the way that the world appears to you in order to feel that sense of control. It's a strong variation on what possibly could land for some of you. Some of you might not experience that. Some of you might have a very strong Pisces energy and just be like, yeah, I just go with the flow, right? You are learning to find that equilibrium between having practical things within your life, right, balanced and available, so that you don't feel unhinged and just kind of floating untethered. But this is also an opportunity to see where certain patterns within your life you might have needed to internalize in order to keep things away from the uncertainty of life, to keep things minimized in order to deal with complexity. As I said again, the tendency with this type of axis of having Virgo in your sixth house and Pisces in your 12th is life was at many times very it had a lot of crises in it. And so you've learned over time to become very comfortable at being, to stop and prepare for every possible outcome, to avoid the potential crisis that could experience, because growing up or living your life, you've been sensitive to where that chaos has led to things just feeling like they're falling apart. So the challenge here again is to realize that sometimes we have to go through experiences where things need to fall apart and decay and fall away in order for something new to be renewed. So the growth potential that comes along with this lunar eclipse here in your sixth house is to stop trying to fix every single thing through daily management and management of every single moment and every single detail, and to slow down and to actually sometimes just feel the present moment, and to be present and to feel the reality of the larger world that we inhabit, and be okay with that. Sometimes to be okay with the messiness, sometimes to allow for experiences in the past that have been challenging and difficult to go through, to integrate, to just sit with, and just to allow for like a reset of your emotional system, and to ultimately release some of the like ways that you think it should have been, the ideal that you should have had, right? So oftentimes with this type of signature, we can project how it should have been, right? It should have been like this. And you're learning to become more comfortable and more content with things that's okay, that's how it was. This is what I wanted it to be, but this is how it landed up being. and to learn that sometimes life is a little bit more messy. And the more that you step into that space with this lunar eclipse, the more that you'll start to reconnect with a sense of depth about life that gives you that feeling of safety. Not in a way like that the walls of a house give you a sense of safety from the elements, but more of a sense of safety that you can cope with and deal with the unknown and know that you'll come out the other side more enriched from the experience. And it doesn't necessarily always mean that it will lead to crisis, right? So this is very much about healing a lot of things within your life. You'll see lots of potential and patterns of integration and emotional acceptance and releasing for things to be, so you can move on, right? That's the potential here. And so ultimately, the deeper purpose that comes with this lunar eclipse is for you to become more friendly with acceptance of how things are, right? To become more accepting of how things are, rather than to try to fix them if they give any slight hint that they're not in alignment with the most perfect ideal that could possibly exist. This is a part of you that's sometimes learning to just go with the flow of things and to experience another way and seeing what life has to offer. Sometimes to just be in deep acceptance of the messiness of things. We have now completed the entire set of eclipses through the houses. And if those of you that are watching this section over here, you've watched your eclipse through the house, and you want to know what it is that you can do to really utilize this eclipse in a way that's meaningful and integrative, and it helps you step into a stronger version of yourself. Know that this is an eclipse that grows and nurtures and helps us over the next 5.5 to 6 months. So this is about you setting your sails for working with the themes that I've brought to the surface here, and let those themes naturally nurture you over the next 5 to 6 months. And with all of the other transits that are going around at the same time, you will find yourself stepping more and more into an alignment with what feels authentic and true for yourself. Okay, so this is about the true version of yourself. This is about clarifying what you do want and letting go of what you don't, and being able to allow that sense of vulnerability and that comfort zone to be challenged so that you can actually step into that new version, right? And when I say new version, I mean something that you feel deeply inside of you that you want to continue to nurture and grow, so that you can experience more of that within your life. And you have that sense of that there is in each and one of us, there's a sense of something new that wants to emerge. We're at that precipice point where we want to just allow for that final piece of what's holding you back to be released, so that you can step more and more deeper into the experience of what it is that you feel is alive and real for you at the moment. Okay? All right, my friends, if you haven't watched the lunar eclipse video itself, make sure you check that out on the channel as well. This is just through the houses. It gives you a lot more context of what I've just shared. But until the next video, take care. Bye-bye.